Carlton, who's a former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
Hello and welcome to the Black Spy podcast. My name is Carlton King, and what we do is we lift the cover off the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations. And we make the interconnection between that and the geopolitical world, which we inhabit in the secret world. For those who subscribe, and I hope you all do, what you will know is that we have guests on the show. And one of the things I love to do is to make the synergies between the secret world and the world of the guest. Now, one of those areas which it's very easy to do is to make those connections is the world of diamonds, gold, and the wealthier things in life. And today's special guest, and I'm extremely happy to have her on board, and it's taken some cajoling to get her here, is a person who inhabits the world of diamonds and gold, and who got to that world from a very strange place. I'll say no more, because I like to keep you a little bit tense and wondering what it's about. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Jayne. She'll give you her name and the rest of it, and she'll tell you how she got from where she was, the bit I will tell you is a council estate, to this world that's not one that everybody has the opportunity to see. Jayne, thanks very much for coming on the show, and I'll leave it with you to explain how you got into this world, which I've just been talking about.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, my name's Jayne Bond, and I spent 25 years in the jewellery business, and I came into it by accident. So as Carlton has just said, I was raised on a council estate in Ipswich, and by accident, I ended up in London, and by fluke, I then ended up in the jewellery business in a very closed community. Did you want to ask me some questions about it?
Yeah, I do, Jayne. Now, one of the things with you is you underplay everything. So I just want to know, when you say I ended up in London and I ended up in the jewellery trade, how did that ending up get you there? Because you went to London to do what?
To start a new life. I wanted better than the environment that I was raised in, and decided that I wanted to go and work and live in London. So I found an opportunity advertised that helped me facilitate that move.
Okay. So, I mean, you don't need to say anything about it at all, but I know that it wasn't a normal opportunity. If you just want to say the smallest little bit about it, and we'll come off it, because that's not why you're on the show, but how did that opportunity show itself? And why would you want to leave Ipswich?
Okay, so nothing in my life is normal anyway. Sorry. Yeah, growing up in Ipswich, my education wasn't in a really good place, actually. The school was in special measures. I took my exams in the local Labour club because some boy in my year set the school alight. So it wasn't probably the best environment. And Ipswich is very famous for some brutal murders, and some of those people their family were around me in life, and I knew that I needed to move out to better myself. And by chance I saw an advert for a housemaid in Clarence House. Obviously I knew that Clarence House was the Queen Mother's house, and so I went from Council House to Clarence House, which was a bit of a culture shock. So that's how I got out of Ipswich into London.
Hang on, let me get this right. So there's just a magazine, and inside the magazine it says, we're looking for people in Clarence House. Surely it's not that easy. Surely there were, 100,000 other people going for the job, and you had to sit and interview and so on and so forth.
Okay, how politically incorrect do you want me to be? Okay, so they advertise in the East Anglian Daily Times, and I believe, being politically correct, that the royal family target deprived areas to give people opportunities. And so I saw an advert in the East Anglian Daily Times, just as if you would see a job wanting a taxi driver or whatever. And I responded to that advert knowing that it was a royal household, got an interview, received a cooch check, which I'd never seen before. And before you know it, I'm being interviewed and offered a job and turned up with a suitcase and moved in. So that's how it came about.
Now, listen, you can be as politically incorrect as you so wish. My stance is well known. Whatever your stance is, I don't want to make guests think one way or the other. It's up to guests to stand by their own beliefs. So the bottom line is that you end up in the royal household of the Queen Mother in an era when, frankly, there's a moving in the United Kingdom about really the haves and the have-nots. Thatcher against the people who perceive that Thatcher has undermined their standard and way of living. How did that affect you, coming from a working class area, thinking presumably that you were getting a short end of the straw? How did it affect you to go to the royal household?
To be honest, I didn't actually perceive it like that. There was a lot of problems with our IRA bombing at the time. I remember that being quite an issue. Also, the military regime of a royal household wasn't something that I'd quite budgeted for. Obviously, the people, the right-hand people to the royal family are Sandhurst people, and they've had the training of a military regime where on a council estate, you don't quite have that. So that was a bit of a shock. And also coming from the background that I was in, I wasn't ever around the gay community, and the royal household tended to employ a lot of the gay community, very flamboyant characters, and that was something that I struggled to get my head around. I remember my very first day that there was a load of queens in the Queen's household calling each other girls' names when they were men, and it was like, okay, is this really happening? So that was a bit of a culture shock for me. But to be honest, I ended up having a great time with them. They were absolutely wonderful. So yeah, that was probably the biggest shock to me.
So, yeah, and people should think and understand that this is about, what, 80-odd?
1990.
1990, right. People need to understand that the Thatcher government was preventing the teaching of anything to do with gay people in schools. Clause 9. And the idea of this was that it was saying that we are undermining the British culture, we're undermining the way people should think. They were also saying things like, in fact, when it came into the Major era, he talked about back to basics away from this. So it's quite interesting to me that the royal household is functioning differently. You're talking about having Sandhurst military individuals there, and then you're saying that there's a lot of people who were openly gay, which is, great, but you would have thought that wouldn't have somehow been the norm within the royal households. I guess listeners are thinking, how does that work?
To be honest, the Queen Mother must have been incredibly liberal and accepting, because it is widely publicised, the story of Billy Talon, beautiful man, and he lived with his boyfriend Reg in, I think it's now the ticket office down the Mall. They were very close personnel to the Queen Mother, and she did have bit of banter really with one of her chefs who she used to call Queenie. So it was widely accepted.
To me, that's very interesting. A guy who has had some connection with the royals, and people would have heard that in earlier episodes. But I stated within one of those earlier episodes that I wouldn't have wanted to work amongst royalty protection for the pure and simple reason that I wouldn't have been able to stand protocol. And I wouldn't have been able to stand what I thought was an illiberal perspective on life. And having had a little bit of a connection, very small, I've told you the story with Diana and how she seemed to be hemmed in. And I guess the same type of thing happened to Meghan Markle, albeit for a different reason, that Meghan Markle would have come from the US. And the military element that you're talking about probably felt alien to her. I'm surprised that above these gatekeepers, because I guess these military guys are like the people who control stuff, but above them, the royals, are potentially different. Is that what you're saying to me?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I didn't enjoy the people that worked around the Queen Mother, the military side, albeit I'm actually a military mother myself, which is because I believe in the structure of the armed forces.
Yeah.
But when you go from not having any training to the deep end of living in a military operation, it wasn't a pleasant experience. I didn't enjoy it at all.
And is that what kind of forced you to leave? I mean, that's a force. Is that why you left, that you couldn't grow, or what was it?
It's going to sound really bad, but I actually wanted better from my life. And that sounds really terrible. But when you're in a restrictive life and it's going to suppress you, if you don't leave and get out and flourish, then, it's no different to being on the council estate and stuck in. So, I got out. I chose to leave.
Right. When you say this, how were you treated? How were you in the role that you did? And I'm not going to pry into what role you did or anything like that, because I know the role is quite sensitive and I know you signed acts and all the rest of it. So I'm not going to get into that. But in the role you did, how were you treated? Do you eat their food? Do you have the best of times? Do you travel with them? How does it function in your role?
I'd rather not say.
Okay, no problems. We'll leave it at that. Listen, guys and gals, listen to the show. The show's all about respecting secrecy. Obviously, I provide you with a view of the world and how things function, but I'm always cognizant of not saying anything that would cause present-day operations or present-day tactical elements to be undermined. And Jayne is saying exactly the same thing. So I'm happy with that. No problems whatsoever. Okay, Jayne, so you leave the royal household. What next?
I came away with a husband.
How does that happen? Not everybody who turns up in the royal household gets a husband. You just explained that to me. How does that work?
We weren't husband and wife for a bit, but yeah, 30 years on, and I'm still with him. So my husband was in royalty protection, and it's a no-brainer. All of the men that work in the royal household are gay, and then the police were not. It was a work romance.
Okay.
So that's how it came about. And so we set up home and in Surrey, which is a very different area to where I'd grown up. And we started to enjoy nice holidays, and we went on holiday to Hong Kong, bought a digital camera, and then we went on holiday to Dubai and bought some jewellery. And they were just like short trips. When I was like a headless chicken in the gold souks, never seen anything like it, realised the products in Dubai were cheap, and bought a lot too much. And when I got back from the holiday, I realised I'd really overspent and decided I need to recover some money here, because I've got a great big credit card bill. I've been a bit stupid on holiday, and decided that I would work out how to sell the jewellery to recover the money. And no intention of coming into the jewellery trade at all. It was just, okay, let's resolve this problem that I've created for myself. And I found on dial-up back in the day, on an old AOL account, a company that was very much like eBay, and they were trading all kinds of things on the internet where you could auction. So it was very similar to eBay. And I took a digital photograph of the items, posted a description, put it on the internet, and they sold within hours of actually getting listed. And I was approached by the buyer of the company because they were auctioning their own items and allowing the general public to auction. And he came to my house, and I was living in Windsor at the time, and he came to my house and said, "Are you a professional buyer?" So I said, "Yes." And then thought, I'll work out a plan how to deal with this after he's gone. So after he left, my husband said, "Okay, how are we going to do this?" He said, "Let's go back to Dubai." And I said, let's see whether we can hustle some solution here. I'm somebody I've always had a fantastic network of people around me, friends, contacts. And so I made a phone call to a jeweller, and he told me, "You need to go to Hatton Garden." He said, "Be careful of this street, be careful of that street, because there's some colourful characters down there. But I know a man who you need to go and meet. Go to this guy, he'll sell you some jewellery." So I walked into a wholesaler, didn't know him from Adam, bag of money in my hand, and said, "I need to buy some jewellery." Randomly picked a load of items and went back home, took some photographs, put them back on the internet, and that's how it started. And each week I was buying and selling, using other wholesalers as well. But there was one that I particularly bonded with as a character, because he was quite interested in how I was selling more than bricks and mortar jewellers. And obviously people back in the day at that time weren't selling anything on the internet. He was a bit of a techie guy, wanted to get into it, and asked if I would come and work for him. Out of my naivety, I didn't know that his name was a Jewish name, and he's got a very obvious Jewish name. Didn't understand that I weren't allowed to work Friday afternoons. Didn't understand the Saturday, the whole religious side of things. And I agreed to work for him because at that time, the internet was also very dangerous with credit card fraud, and they wanted me to start taking the transactions. And I decided it would be a safer risk to go and work for him than take the gamble on receiving the money on the internet and getting myself in financial problems. And so that was the start of a relationship with somebody that lasted 16 years. When I joined him, he had a turnover of 100,000, and I got him up to 6 million a year over a long period of time. And that was when gold was trading at £2.85 a gram. So that was like really stupid money. I mean, you can add another 10, to be honest, I've not checked the fix lately, but the gold fix is well in excess of £12-15, I would say by now. And so that was the start of the jewellery business for me.
So basically what you're saying to me is you bought like a royal on holiday, and because that you did that, you had to find a way back, and you just basically had the nous, the capacity to do it. It was just innate within you to be able to buy and sell. Because I noticed when you said, I didn't want to stop you in any way along the way, I noticed when you said you went in and you bought stuff from him, not knowing the game as such. How were you buying it? Were you buying it on just how it looked, or were you buying it on how you thought people, your customers, would want to buy it? What was your reasoning for buying the stuff you bought?
I took a gamble on everything. It was like I knew nothing about the jewellery trade. I didn't know what the gold fix was. I didn't know that you bought it by weight. I didn't know anything about hallmarking. I knew absolutely nothing. I just completely was the queen of blag. And on the back of it, I'm somebody with a lot of tenacity about me. I don't like looking a fool in anything that I do. And I remember, in fact, I won't name the man, but a jeweller ate me alive on the telephone, knowing full well that I didn't understand the industry. And he is a jeweller, and his father-in-law was an England football manager. And he actually inspired me because he made me feel stupid. And by making me feel stupid, I went and learned. And I went from absolutely understanding nothing to years down the line, I've represented some of the biggest people in India in the diamond industry, and I've been their UK door opener. So I went from 0 to 60 in the jewellery business, and anywhere in between I've been there. Yeah, it was probably because this jeweller being sarcastic and rude to me that gave me the tenacity to understand the trade better than I do now.
That's interesting. So, and did your mentor not aid you as well? Did he not say, this is what it is, this is what the spot, the fix is that you call it, this is what it is?
The gold fix, yeah.
Gold fix, this is how it works, this is what a diamond looks like. Did he not give you that sort of knowledge or provide you with that sort of knowledge?
He did. I picked things up as I went along. Every time somebody asked me a difficult question, I would go and challenge him. What's this? What does that mean? So yeah, he did mentor me, and it was understanding how to calculate from 24 carat into 9 carat, 18 carat. All of those kind of things were like totally alien to me, and it was something that he'd grown up around and understood the industry from top to bottom. So yeah, it was a lot of learning on the job.
2 weeks ago, maybe even 3 weeks ago, depending on when I put this out, I had a full US bird colonel on the show who later obtained a position as a 2-star general. Now, what she had said to me was that her biggest challenge was being a woman in what was perceived to be a man's world. For her, it was the army. I'm wondering if that's for you. How many women jewellers were there?
Well, I wasn't really a jeweller. I was more a salesperson. One, I'm around an Orthodox Jewish community, so I had to understand the protocols of not going to shake a rabbi's hand, and also being respectful of their religious things, where something that I would naturally do, they would be aghast at. Simple things, really simple things. So that there was that. And also, yeah, it's very much a man's world. I don't actually drive, believe it or not. And I used to go up and down the country with 20 kilos of gold in my bag. And that's not for the faint-hearted for a woman.
What are we talking about, 20 kilos of gold? What give me an idea, price-wise, cost-wise?
Back in the day, I'd have to get some maths going, but it was a lot of money. And I used to get the train from King's Cross to Newcastle, and that's a long journey where you need to stop to go to the loo. And
why Newcastle? Sorry, but why Newcastle? You're saying King's Cross to Newcastle. Why Newcastle?
Because my boss was a bit of a joker. And I said to him, I moved to Peterborough, and I said to him that I used to commute from Peterborough every day. And I said to him, if I fall asleep on the train, I end up in Newcastle. So he'd take a catalogue and flog some stuff for me. So I did. And I literally used to jump on the train with, as I say, 20 kilo of gold. I used to take ridiculous gambles in life. And one day I needed to go to the loo. So I looked around the train carriage and I thought, oh, okay, right. If I leave this here, I'm going to look obvious taking a great big suitcase into the loo, or I can leave it here and ask somebody to keep an eye on it. So I found the chavviest looking person on the train and tapped him on the shoulder and said, could you look after my bag for me? And then there was another time some bloke, lifting 20 kilo is for a female is quite weighty. And I was struggling to get the suitcase in the overhead. And some man said to me, what you got in here, the crown jewels? They had no idea. So anyway, going back to Newcastle, I did fantastic business up there. They had a group of people where they had these trends where nobody down south would sell the same stuff. And it was a niche market, and we just sold kilos and kilos of gold up there. And so Newcastle was like a second home to me. I used to jump off the train and go to Darlington, Doncaster, literally being a sales rep on the train. And yeah, it was fun.
Brilliant. So this is you doing your bit amongst the company. How do you spread out and become international, get into the world that could be utilized in different ways? What I mean by that is my knowledge of diamonds is zero and gold, except for the fact that I know that a lot of organizations that I would deal with, terrorist organizations, even intelligence organizations from different areas, would utilize gold, diamonds in order to perform operations, because it's a stock of value that you can utilize that has monetary value in fiat currency, in normal currency. You can sell it off for anything. And so it's any action that you need to work through, any terrorist action, even any state subversive action. You need some type of money to make it function. You need to function. You need money. So when I think of diamonds and I think of gold, I always think of people do things wrong. Can you explain, is that the case? Do people often do wrong within that sphere? And how do you stop that?
Okay. The first thing I'm going to tell you is terrorism actually changed why I went from gold to diamonds, which you probably would never have imagined I was going to answer that.
No, not at all.
And it was when the Twin Towers hit, and I was sitting in an office in Greville Street in Hatton Garden, and I happened to be with one of probably the most well-known sales reps out of Italy, and he worked for one of the major manufacturers. And as people were jumping out of the Twin Towers, he picks the phone up to check what the gold fix was doing, because he knew the moment that something terrorist happening, everybody's going to move their money to gold. And it was that moment in history that actually changed the instability in the gold prices. So I used to be able to go out and know the price of what I was selling the gold between 5p. After the Twin Towers, because gold's a safe haven,
yes,
people would invest into gold, and it would send the market into carnage, really. And after a couple of years after that, obviously I'd made my guy lots of money, and he decided that he was going to sell his business, because what was happening is retail jewellers that had bought stock on credit, whether they got three months credit out of us, because the gold fix became unstable, the cheeky jewellers were sending it back as a return and making more money on a credit note than actually what they'd paid for the gold.
Sorry, Jane, you're going to have to explain that. So when you first went in, you said he was making 100,000, you got him to 6 million. But he was giving this stuff out to people. How is it not making him more money? I don't understand.
Okay, let me recap. So, for example, he's actually somebody that trades relatively local to me, and he was a market trader, and he'd sold him some gold, and my boss had a relationship with him. If something didn't sell, he would be able to return it and buy something new or get his money back. And he didn't do that to everybody, because obviously gold's a currency. But what was happening is people were returning stock that they'd bought a month or 2 months before, because the gold prices were rising so high that they made money by returning the goods.
So your boss wasn't getting the money back at the price he provided it to him. He was getting the money, they were getting the money back at the prices that it had gone up.
I'll give you an excellent, hilarious scenario here. The buyers at Argos probably didn't quite understand what the gold fix was. Now, in the gold industry, you have guaranteed weights. Whether it be a curb chain, you might have a quarter of an ounce, half an ounce, 1 ounce, which under the UK law, you've got guaranteed weights.
Okay.
So some smart aleck at Argos decided that they were going to do a half price sale and sold the gold under the gold fix.
Right, for less than it was worth in gold. Yeah, okay.
It was a free-for-all. One of my jewellers phoned me up and said, Jane, I've got a sale on 50% off. Sell your boots. I literally went out with bags of money, and we were doing click and collect in every Argos that you could possibly imagine. And we were buying it, getting the boxes back, claiming the VAT back, and taking it straight down the smelters with compliments of Argos. And so it's people that go into the industry that don't really understand what's happening. And you'll always have the clever people that do. So there's lots of loopholes. And obviously, crime has always been an issue around the gold industry. And obviously the Brinks mat is probably the most famous for it.
Has that got to do with normal jewellery and normal gold? The Brinks mat was, as I understand it, you explained it to me, gold that had been in ingots, which they broke into Heathrow and stole the ingots. But are you saying there's a different element to that, or is it all the same thing?
That gold had to turn into a commercial item to get it, to fence it back into the system.
Right, so that's what you're saying. Okay, so they make jewellery out of it and they sell it on and whatever else. That's how you mean in the Brinks mat element.
Yes. So there's always crime around gold and diamonds. It's just, that's how it is.
Yeah. So it's basically what people are saying akin today. People are talking about Bitcoin and they're saying, oh, there's a lot of big crime being caused by Bitcoin. That crime was already there in gold and diamonds. So regardless of what you have, if it's a sense of value, a store of value, you're going to have the crime. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. And it's just, I'm afraid to say the police don't really quite understand it. I don't think to the level. I mean, I can give you a very good example of how the police don't understand the industry. I do a lot of charity work around county lines, which is quite a serious subject. And
so explain for those people who don't know who are not in the United Kingdom, county lines is where basically dealers in drugs, generally from outside the major conglomerations, London, Manchester, wherever, take the drug dealing to smaller places, take over a place, sometimes called Cuckooing, for a short period of time, and sell the drugs via other individuals. Generally, very young people, actually, who sell the drugs for them. So that's what Jayne means by county lines. Carry on, please, Jayne.
So basically, it's Fagin all over again, just a 2021 version of it.
Yeah.
And ironically, Fagin was based the story in Hatton Garden. Yeah. So, for example, my son was watching somebody on Instagram, and he'd found this guy on Instagram because he was a criminal with a mobile phone in prison. And instead of watching Love Island, he decided it'd be more amusing to watch these people getting away with an absolute blue murder and was seeing how they were living in prison because it was more interesting. And he was in the house one day and he came running through and he went, "Mum, look," I won't say the guy's name. He said, "He's in Hatton Garden. Do you know this building?" I said, "Yes, of course I do." And he went, "Oh, he snapped again. Here he is. Do you know this building?" And I said, "Yes, I used to work in that building." I said, "He's going in. He's going to go and get his teeth diamond grill set." That guy was absolutely stupid. He'd put it on social media. He was talking about his nitties and his trappers. He had bags of money, bags of money.
Jayne, can you translate for the people listening? Nitties.
Okay, a trap house is where they deal the drugs. Nitties are addictive people, and it's a very sad life. And so he's making bags, as they call it, loads and loads of money. And so he's decided to go and get himself iced up, which is obviously covered in loads of diamonds. He's gone to somebody to go and have a set of diamond teeth grills made, which are made from an impression of your mouth. Now, if the police wanted to police it correctly, you've got somebody who's showing cash. So there's the proceeds of crime. You've got a product that fits his mouth and his mouth only. And he couldn't justify where he's got those funds from. If the police had the resources, that would be a way of taking
That's the big one. The resources. That's absolutely the big one. That's what you're saying.
And
knowledge.
The knowledge.
Yeah. You see, because they're basically using the store of value, aren't they? They're showing off. I've got this grill, I've got these teeth, it's all gold in it, diamonds in it, whatever. But in reality, what they're also doing is they are laundering that for future. So you've got this stuff in your mouth and it stays with you. It's the old gold tooth that people used to have years and years ago. It's how do I carry my wealth with me? I put it in my teeth. This is interesting. Yeah. Sorry, Jayne, go ahead. I like to explain to the listeners things.
Well, these gang members are not particularly bright either, because when they go and have a pendant made to represent their gang, then it's like putting a beacon around your neck. I'm in that gang with that gang because they have the same piece of jewellery. So they're not exactly the brightest pennies. But anyway, so there's some plenty of people making a lot of money on the back of them.
So what does your trade do to prevent that? And internationally, because I know you were doing some work in the urn around the world, internationally, how is that policed? And the last question would be, you can work all these through. Internationally, how is the scamming of gold and diamonds stopped or not? In fact, is there any action against them?
Honestly, I had somebody, I'm everybody's phone a friend. As soon as somebody gets offered a gold or diamond deal, they always find me when they need to resolve the problem and to work out how they're going to sell it. I am like a one-woman crime watch. And to be honest, I've got to the point where I've got zero tolerance of it. The first thing I ask is, usually the commodity is in Africa. So I've now got it down to a short list. Where is the item? Africa. Goodbye. Okay. Then they usually start on gold. Then they normally, which is doré gold, which is crudely smelted gold, where you've got no way of telling the clarity of that metal. And then they normally start on rough cut diamonds, which are illegal to trade because they have a thing called the Kimberley process to prevent blood diamonds. So anybody trading in rough stones is illegal. I can give you some examples of idiots that have approached me. I was actually living in Spain at the time, and I got a phone call from a friend who'd got a friend and had got some stones, and they were rough cuts. So question was, where in the world are they? And he said, London. I thought, oh, somebody's done well.
Sorry, rough cut. A rough cut is, it has been cut but not properly, or what? What does it mean?
No, it's as it's come out of the ground and
Right.
to be cut and polished to made into a commercial gem.
Well, would that be illegal to be in London then?
100%.
Right.
And so the idiot who smuggled it from Liberia, who's then got another, it was a 20 carat and a 5 carat. And I was asked, what does he do? So I've had plenty of people ring me and ask me, including journalists that are involved in shake scams who wanted to entrap jewellers, phone me as a friend to ask me questions. And I give people genuine, honest advice. So on this occasion, the person had the stone in the UK. You can't take it to somebody legit because people legit don't touch it. So he had to go on the dark side. And he went to see somebody who immediately pulled out sandpaper, starts to polish, to rub the stone with sandpaper, and material came off it. And immediately that was a fake. So the guy had not only taken a risk of what he thought of smuggling illegal diamonds, but he's now got another 200 carats sitting in a safe in Liberia, knowing he's got phony gear. And then he's not happy that he thinks that he's been turned over on this fake. So he wants to go and see somebody else for a second opinion. So he goes to a polisher who, even just unwrapping the diamond, supposedly diamond, says that's not real. And then wants to put a beacon on his head and go to a gem lab, walking in with something that is fake, been told twice that it was fake, to say, I've illegally smuggled this, can you test it if it's a real diamond? And it was like, what part of idiot do you not understand? As it goes, that man, I happened to be talking to the polisher about 2 years later when somebody else had another scam with who approached me, and he said, you're never going to guess. That guy that came in with that stone, he said he offloaded it onto somebody else. Some man bought it in and I had to drop the bombshell, he's got a fake. And so people hustle and people do stupid things and they all think they're on a get-rich-quick scheme.
What I should clarify for the listeners, what I know is that you have contacted, can I say this? You've contacted authorities on some of these scams. And this is why you're not 100% saying that the police know what they're doing, because you've contacted them and said, listen, I know of X, Y, and Z a scam, and you know that the police haven't been able to deal with it. I just want to explain that to people.
My Twitter account, I tried to expose somebody. I actually tried to report them for attempted fraud on a ruby, which was supposedly certified. The inquiry came through a member of aristocracy. They came from somebody who was aristocracy, okay? The level of contacts that I've got in the industry. And he said, I've got this man. Can I give him your number? I talk to anybody, so I said, sure. So this man gets on the phone, giving me this great big story about this amazing ruby that he's got. He's got the certification, etc., etc. On face value of the conversation, brilliant. The moment I received the certification, I could see that it was a very poor attempt of a fraud case. It wasn't a legitimate certification at all. Then the gentleman then sent me to his website, which was a gold website. And to be quite frank, as a British man, the Africans did a much better deal at doing the scams than him. He was absolutely diabolical at it. I contacted the police authority, I think it was Somerset, I think he was based. I contacted them. to prevent him from defrauding other people, because I know what I'm talking about. Innocent people might think that he's got a genuine deal and they're not interested, absolutely not interested. You cannot prevent crime from happening. So it is laughable. I had one today where it's always a friend of a friend, and it's a very large stone where an estate agent is come to me via a friend that I trust, and the estate agent is selling a property to some wealthy person in London, and the person has offered an estate agent a diamond sale. Now, that's the first problem. If you're not in the jewellery business, why are you being offered a deal on gold or diamonds? But people see the dollar signs and they think they're going to go on a quick rich scheme, but it's not reality. And it wears me thin, to be quite honest. And I've got no tolerance level of it now.
Jayne, I'm looking at my time. As I said to you, the show's a bite-sized show. We work between 35 and 45 minutes. There's a million things I can ask you. We could go on for another hour and a half, which I won't. But what I would want to do is have you back on the show. But what I want you to tell people is, in this first segment of the show, I'll have you back at a later stage, is basically to explain, because you think the policing authority is unable, incapable of doing something like the estate agent wanting to use a fella trying to sell a diamond to buy a house, and the diamond you feel is fake straight away. What I'd like you to do is explain in the next minute or so, which we got with the show, is what should one do if one is offered these type of obviously bogus deals?
The first thing is to ask yourself, why are they asking me? If you're not in the jewellery business, you haven't got any contacts, why are they asking you? It's like buying something down the pub back in the day. It's wrong.
Right. And what would you say to authorities? How could they better investigate this type of crime, which you see every day? These scams are going on every day.
There needs to be an awareness campaign that these scams are not real.
Yeah, okay. So they call you because you're well known in the game. So you're a well-known trader. So that's why they're calling you. We haven't touched on your international trade, which we will do at a different time, but that's why they're calling you. But so I just wanted to explain that to listeners. But in the end, what you're saying is, think about what you're doing. These things are generally scams if it's diamonds or gold, and you're not part of that industry. And frankly, you're just being greedy. I'm saying what you're not saying. You're just being greedy. That's all you're trying to be. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm breaking the law.
Clearly, I'm breaking the law. But the problem is, you see, if the law isn't catching people, it makes people think that being greedy is okay. That's the problem. Listen, Jayne, thank you very much. We've only scratched the surface of what I was interested to hear. The fact that you started on the fact that after 9/11 that your gold guys thought straight away, hey, this is now good for me in gold. But you jumped to diamonds because you knew you'd have a product that was more orientated, that you could know what the price was. We haven't touched on that, so I'd like to look at that at a later show. It's clear for all to see, listeners, the synergies between Jayne and the secret world and how in geopolitics this moves around. There's a whole host of things that we could speak about, which we will get to in another episode. But for now, all I've got to say is, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to the show. Jayne, thank you very much, and we will see you next week.
Carlton King is a real-life working-class spy, bringing you the details, the stories, and secrets from his life spent spying. Give us a 5-star rating on Apple iTunes, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss any of the excitement. This is for your ears only.
My name's Carlton King, and I'm an ex-spy.
This podcast was produced by a podcast company. If you need help with your podcast, simply visit apodcastcompany.com or email Jason at apodcastcompany.com.